Look at the Korean peninsula at night. One half is ablaze with light and industry, while the other sits in a near total void of darkness. Both sides share the same climate, topography, and deep cultural history, yet one side experiences profound wealth, while the other faces severe deprivation. If geographic location determines a nation's destiny, this stark divide would be impossible. This chart shows constraints on Korean leaders since the 1950s. Starting similarly, their rules rapidly diverged. Following South Korea's solid line, a spike in the late 20th century represents the adoption of inclusive governance, where leaders faced strict legal checks. The physical result of those rules is the sprawling infrastructure, advanced technology, and dense skyline of modern Seoul. Geography provides the stage, but it is the rules of the game, the institutions, that dictate how a nation performs. If geographic location doesn't guarantee wealth, the logical next assumption is that sitting on massive reserves of oil, diamonds, or minerals does. Yet, in many nations sitting on vast mineral wealth, the broader population remains trapped in extreme poverty, performing manual labor with no legal protection. Compare that to nations that successfully manage their resource wealth, utilizing advanced infrastructure to fund expansive public safety nets and sovereign wealth funds. This graphic details the resource curse. When an extractive government is entirely funded by valuable resources, it doesn't need to collect citizen taxes. The social contract is severed. Elites ignore public infrastructure and extract wealth, resulting in weak institutions and extreme inequality. Without inclusive institutions to manage the revenue, natural resources often act as a mechanism to fund corruption rather than a public blessing. We can observe how these institutional rules work in practice by looking at two neighboring countries in southern Africa, Botswana and Zimbabwe. Following independence, Botswana's leadership, led by Seretse Khama, prioritized consensus. They evolved traditional tribal laws into a formal system of private property rights. Because these legal protections were firmly established, Botswana was able to manage its massive diamond reserves without succumbing to the resource curse, resulting in decades of steady economic growth. Across the border, Zimbabwe transitioned under Robert Mugabe into a highly centralized and revolutionary model of governance. The state executed rapid, unchecked land expropriation. They dismantled the concept of private ownership, transferring assets based on political loyalty rather than market predatory. When a government demonstrates it can arbitrarily revoke property rights, foreign investment vanishes and domestic production stalls. The economic engine simply fails. The link between historical property rights and modern wealth was formalized by the 2024 Nobel Prize-winning economists Darren Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James Robinson. Their research relies on a clear division. Inclusive institutions distribute power broadly and enforce contracts. Extractive institutions concentrate power in the hands of a few, designed to siphon resources from the population. Look at this map. It highlights a historical reversal. The regions that were the most densely populated and wealthy in the early 1500s are often among the poorest regions today. The laureates trace this reversal to settler mortality. In regions where European colonizers faced high mortality rates from tropical diseases, they chose not to settle. Instead, they installed extractive institutions designed to loot resources and funnel them back to Europe. Conversely, in areas with temperate climates and low disease burdens, the colonizers settled permanently. Because they lived there, they demanded inclusive institutions, like courts and property rights, to protect their own interests. Once established, these extractive systems remained highly profitable for a narrow elite. Local leaders often maintained these same exploitative structures long after the colonial powers left. The global wealth gap we see today is largely the result of decisions made 5 centuries ago regarding who was allowed to own property and who was to be exploited. Secure property rights provide the soil for an economy, but the actual crop that drives modern growth is human capital. This chart shows the effect of human capital, which includes formal schooling, health, and training. As average years of education increase, national GDP curves upward, multiplying a nation's productivity. But if citizens fear the state will seize their business, they will not invest years into studying or innovating. The investment flatlines. So, are poor nations doomed by their colonial past? History points to critical junctures. moments of crisis or war that disrupt old patterns and allow a society to rewrite its rules. Moving power away from an entrenched elite is a difficult, high-friction process. Yet, as the 2024 Nobel laureates demonstrated, these structural shifts create the incentives that turn local innovations into long-term growth. A nation's wealth is not buried in the ground, nor is it determined by the weather. It is built in its courts, forged in its schools, and sustained by the freedom to innovate without fear.